a storm, brewing up a storm, brewing up inside, and his eyes are wild and it can't go on. He's brewing up a storm.
Okay, welcome to Galway Politics Live. Today we're shooting it from the O'Reilly's Bar and Kitchen, so thanks very much Anthony O'Reilly and all the staff here. They've been very, very good. I'd like to introduce our panel for today. We have from the Green Party Senator Pauline O'Reilly, we have Councillor Cheevers, we have Frank Fahy. Councillor Cheevers, of course, is Fianna Fáil, one of the most progressive councillors out there. We have Frank Fahy, a veteran of the Galway City Council from Fine Gael, and we have Connolly, former councillor and now a TD. So you're all very welcome, guys. And of course I have my co-host who nearly got forgot there in the bush of it, Niall Brolcháin. So Niall,
hello there.
Take it away.
Good morning, Mike. Okay, well, delighted to be joined here in Salthill in O'Reilly's Bar by the august politicians here, and we're practicing obviously social distancing because these are very strange times, but it's great to be back. I think you'll agree, everybody. We've just got a new government in place, and we have representatives of the three parties in government, and we have TD Connolly here, who's obviously not in the government and in the opposition. And what we really want to focus on today is what is the new government going to do for Galway. So what's it going to bring? What are the things that we can do together? Because obviously we're in difficult times, and it is a case of trying to pull together both government and opposition, but at the same time it's the onus on the government to deliver. So Mike, you decide, who are we going to talk to first?
I think we'll talk with Pauline first, because it's a big thing, the Greens coming into government, and it's 12 seats you have, isn't that right?
12 TDs.
12 TDs. How many senators?
We have 4 senators,
Four
and 2
senators.
MEPs.
Excellent.
And 49 councillors, so it's a huge
And
turnaround.
you have an awful lot of lady councillors, is that right?
50-50.
That's great, that's
Yeah.
good. We're the only ones at 50-50, so that's it.
Well, I'm not entirely sure, but
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's the closest. So what do you think of Neil's question? What is the government going to do for Galway?
Well, I think that we have to look at what's the government going to do for the whole country.
Good.
You know, and at the moment, you know, everybody's in the same boat to a certain extent. Now, some parts of the country are more impacted than others, and the west of Ireland in particular. We're really impacted by the hit on tourism. So, I mean, first and foremost, we have the July stimulus, and that's what the government, all three parties in Cabinet are working on.
And what is that stimulus?
Well, look, it's not been announced yet because it's important to get it right. But we know that we have people on COVID payment at the moment, people who need to be protected going forward now as we transition. But also we have businesses, particularly in the SME sector and particularly in tourism, that are impacted. And so I think that some of the things that we find in that July stimulus will be protection for those areas, and also stimulating the economy in those areas so that they can go forward. But I think that for me, it also has to be about protecting the arts, and that's been, you know, crucially that's been hit here in Galway, in particular the arts, because it's not just about tourism.
And especially with
It's also
2020
about
kind of
our
fallen by the
Sorry,
wayside.
I'll ask you all to speak up, please, because we have a slight little issue with the sound. So if you could kind of shout a bit. I know that's not what politicians
That
like
sounds
to
good,
do.
a bit of shouting.
It's not natural. But
And we didn't even get to Anne Cheevers yet, this is good. So can I just move on a little bit from that and just to ask Councillor Cheevers, there's an awful lot of talk about the west of Ireland not having senior ministers. What do you think?
Well, you know, it was 3 different parties. I suppose there was there was a small pool but a large group taking out of the pool, and there had to be difficult decisions made. I mean, the Taoiseach had to make different decisions. He wasn't going to please everybody, and he suppose what he had to do, what he believed were the best people for the jobs and the portfolios that came in front of him. And I believe that's what he did.
Hasn't there been a lot of bitterness though? Let's say take Cllr, the deputy leader didn't get a full cabinet position, and you've got the other guy, Jim, he was the minister or the spokesman, just Jim O'Callaghan, Miriam's brother.
Yeah.
Hey, if Miriam had run, you know.
Dara was disappointed. I mean, he was vocal about that. He said he was disappointed about Dara quite well, and he's played a huge factor in building the party since 2011, and he's been very loyal. But I think the Taoiseach felt that he would be better served as chief whip. He needed him at the cabinet table. I think over the last few days he's now brought in the Gael part of Captain Martin portfolio. He's brought Dara in,
That's right,
in sport and Gael as well.
Good.
And I believe he'll make a valuable contribution on that.
Excellent.
With that portfolio. So I think
There
that
seems to be an awful lot of bitterness though, and they're talking about challenging Niall Martin. I mean, do you not think it's a bit petty when, as you pointed out, the three parties, they can only cover so many people? And then there's the big talk about, should it be geographically better laid out, or is it on ability? I mean, for me, I would much prefer it on ability, because there's a bit of a joke, because of the Cork constituency, you have 3 government ministers, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have the leader of Fianna Fáil, the deputy leader of Fine Gael, and you have the finance spokesman or public service spokesman.
Yeah. Listen, I have to say, to be honest, I wouldn't have agreed with the comments of Deputy Michael Ryan. I mean, we have 3 government with 2 ministers. We have, with the Taoiseach, we have 2 ministers from Cork. I think Cork was served well with the actual with the cabinet posts and the dual minister posts.
That's true. Yeah.
So I definitely didn't agree with that. I also didn't agree with Deputy Willie O'D either for Limerick City. He already been a minister himself on a few occasions. I think Niall Collins, you know,
He was a justice spokesman.
I think Niall Collins, you know, that he's been, you know, young progressive TD. He's always done extremely well in the general election, and I believe that he deserved his opportunity.
Yeah.
And he's got his opportunity.
Okay.
And I think he will be. I think he will be aggressive with that particular portfolio, higher education, with Deputy Simon Harris.
Okay,
So
that's
I think
good.
we're
So it's
quite
going to be interesting. Frank, can I bring you in there? And I mean, is this the end of civil war politics?
Civil war politics ended years ago, everywhere bar in Fáil. I'd like to compliment Deputy Hildegard Naughton on her elevation to a super junior minister. And in relation to ministers being appointed, I think it is important that one is appointed on ability.
Yeah.
This thing of sort of geographical just for the sake of having a minister, I don't think it augurs well for politics. It's to me, it smacks of looking after the boys, jobs for the boys and jobs for the girls, and it has to be down to ability.
Yeah.
And the government and the cabinet works for the whole country, not just for the constituency.
That's a good point.
And in the last government, we had a fantastic minister in Mayo, Michael Ring, who did huge work for the whole country, and as Minister for Rural Affairs. And I would be disappointed, I know Michael Ring is very disappointed that he hasn't been promoted as Minister, but in a situation where you have multi-party government, and you have a constituency like Mayo, and you have 2 capable TDs in government, there's only so many seats to go around.
Yeah.
Derek Cleary was disappointed.
Right.
Michael Ring was disappointed. In Galway here, we had Eamon O'Keefe. He
was never going to get
obviously wanted to be outside the tent rather than in the tent.
I won't say what he'd be doing outside the tent.
So, you know, to me, Eamon O'Keefe has been a minister in the past. He's been a very capable minister. Has done a lot of work for Galway, but obviously he's not on. You know, in a good relationship with Niall Martin. There seems to be an issue there, and at the end of the day, you know, it's about best possible team for the country. The country needs a team now more than ever.
Absolutely.
And the best
that's
team,
good. Frank.
and the best
Neil,
foot forward.
we might bring Neil in there to ask Catherine a question.
Yeah, well, I just like to really ask from the point of view. I'm not involved in the government side of things anymore. I was once upon a time. I was involved with the Green Party, obviously, but you know, I mean, to have a good government, you also need a good opposition. And I mean, it's great to hear sort of everybody in government saying how rosy things could be, but I mean, it's important also. I mean, I'd ask Catherine really, does she have any concerns about the new government? And I suspect she has a multitude of concerns.
Well, I think you might give me a time limit in relation to my concerns about the new government. And just to correct one thing, I understand we have a 2-party government. You know, I understand that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have finally married after a long courtship, which intensified in February 16 when they had a supply and confidence agreement. It wasn't a great name for a love relationship, but it worked in the end, and they've married, and now we have a new government. I'm delighted with this new government. I would really like to get off personalities, if you don't mind, because we have a country with 10,500 people hold us. It's an obscenity, it's unacceptable, and it's a direct result of policies by former governments. And the former governments, by and large, were Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Unless we change those policies, we're going to continue to have more of the same. Pauline said everybody was. I agree with her in relation to ministers. We should be looking at the country. Having said that, it is totally unacceptable that from Donegal down to Kerry, leaving Kerry out, we have no senior minister. And why is that important? Because it reflects the priorities that this government has put to the top. And so they have moved community and rural affairs into social protection. They've hived it off, so we're not putting any emphasis now on rural and community affairs. Now, to my mind, it's vitally important that we balance the development in the cities. And if you allow me to come back to that, I'd like that, because Galway City is one of the 5 cities chosen, and we have a golden opportunity for sustainable development, for a green, vibrant city. So to come back to your specific question, because I like to deal with specific questions. Any government needs a strong opposition. I'm proud to be in opposition. Equally, I would be proud to be in government, and I would take that role as well. But I didn't have that privilege. I have the privilege of being in opposition, and it's vitally important. Over the last 4 years, we put an emphasis on a number of things quite successfully. My colleague, Thomas Pringle, and we were only a small group of 7 independents for change, managed to put through the fossil fuel divestment bill, a fantastic achievement with the support of all the others. We led the Dáil in that regard. We put a policy in relation to the islands because a fantastic asset, but not alone is it an asset, our islands, but it's a way of life for a substantial number of people. No policy, no legislation, in contrast to Scotland, which has both legislation and policy, and the population of the islands is increasing. We also put other motions in relation to cooperative legislation. Unfortunately, the Dáil fell before we could push that. And so they're just some examples. Joan Collins, for example, put a motion in relation to enshrining water within the Constitution as a right, a fundamental right. I understand that's gone now out of the programme for government, which is a disappointment. Let me be positive. I wish the new government the best. I will work with them on the issues that are right, but on the issues that I see that they're not dealing with, I will certainly be a strong voice. If we come back to Galway, I think what the government has done is deeply cynical. They have Eamon Ryan in charge of transport, which is very good, and climate. And then they've put in a super junior, and I've congratulated her, a super junior on international transport and logistics. Now, I'm not sure what that means. I would have preferred a super junior for rural affairs, for community, for sustainable life on this, for going forward in a positive way as to how we deal with climate change. But that hasn't happened. So we've got transport and international logistics. And yet the interpretation of that by the local media, and indeed the national media, was Hildegard is going to go for the outer bypass and Eamon is not for the outer bypass. So it's a piece of elastic. And we're going to pull the elastic like this rather than dealing with the fundamental question: how do we make Galway a vibrant green city, sustainable housing, sustainable transport, and deal with the hospital crisis? To me, it's simple and practical.
Let's go back to transport, because you've been a big exponent of light rail, as I have myself, and the fact is, like, it hasn't even been costed properly. So how do you think we can move forward?
I think the people of Galway have been ahead of us, as the people of Ireland have been. And going back to March, the cold weather, January, February, March, we had a 9-week campaign, and the Glush team also supported us in collecting signatures, which you're very familiar with. We collected 24,000 signatures. We absolutely did our best to get a meeting with Lord Ross, as I call him, Deputy Ross.
Lord Ross, yeah.
Deputy Ross, in relation to
Ex-Deputy
a
Ross.
feasibility study. That didn't happen. I would hope that would be the most basic achievement of this new government and the new Minister for Transport, that at the very least we could have a feasibility study for light rail in Galway.
What do you think, Frank?
In relation to transport in Galway, it's an issue I've been highlighted along with Catherine on the City Council, and I have proposed, and actually I have news but I can't at this moment divulge it, in relation to transport. It's because it's still in the pipeline. We have 2 major issues of traffic in the city. We should have a dedicated school transport system.
Absolutely.
I have proposed that we would have a dedicated school transport.
And you were mayor, you proposed that.
Yes, I did. Yeah. Yes, that would use the existing facilities in the city, like church car parks, in consultation with the church authorities and with their consent and permission. And that children would be dropped off at, say, churches like Renmore, Merview, Ballyban, and buses would pick them up there and bring them to the schools.
And just to stop you for a second, why didn't that happen?
There doesn't seem to be the political will, either locally, nationally, to actually do it, and more so at an executive level than at councillor level. It seems to be an issue there.
Okay.
If you were to sort of put on bus services to provide transport when children to school in the morning, I don't think you would actually need an outer bypass.
Okay.
But while we continue to give priority to vehicles on the road, and we allow children living on the east side of the city to pick and choose where they go to school, and the schools, children sort of in Ballybright and the east side of the city going to school in St. Enda's.
Doesn't make
They're
any
going
sense.
back
Can
and
I
forth.
just stop you there, Frank? Because can I stop you there a sec? Because I've been hearing this, and I've been hearing you saying this, and I've been hearing everybody saying this for many, many years, and yet we haven't made a significant amount of progress in that regard. I mean, now your party is in government. Your party has been in government for many, many years. I mean, what's changed? How are we going to make some progress on this? And I want to give you a specific example. You know, the special needs schools now are supposed to be going back at the moment, and the reason that many of them couldn't is because there are transport issues, because the government hasn't put in place sufficient funding and sufficient protocols to allow that to happen. So the parents are going to have to be looking after the kids themselves in many cases, and in other cases the July provision hasn't gone ahead. So the reality is we're going backwards in that extent, we're not going forwards. So I mean, what's in the programme for government, or what's going to change in that? I mean, it's grand to say, look, this is what we should do. I agree with you. I expect everybody here at the table agrees with you. But how can we deliver on that? How can the new government make a difference in that regard?
Funding?
Yeah, but I mean, is that in the programme for government? Is it there? Is it going to happen?
And you need to have licenses issued to put those buses on the road.
Yeah, but are you
and
going to make that happen?
I've come across situations where a bus company applied for a licence. They wanted a licence every 15 minutes to run across the Prince Centennial Bridge. And in their wisdom, the authority that issues the licences gave them one for every half hour. And when they questioned why they were giving them the licence for every half hour, they were keeping the every 15 minute slot for another company.
But look, Frank,
which
that's
didn't
the,
allow for a
that's
licence.
the sort of thing that an opposition person would say. I mean, what about the government? You know, surely there was an opportunity to get this right in the programme for government. And the first hurdle, like literally the first few days of the government, now this isn't working. I mean, what's going to change? Is there something in the programme for government that you're aware of that's going to make this change?
No.
How are you going to make it happen? We can all give out about it. I can give out, that's my job. It's not your job.
We now have a senior minister, or a junior minister at Cabinet in Galway, and I will be at the first opportunity that when I meet Hildegard Nocton, I will be making that case to her. And we also have a big issue with the design of our city, in that we have the population primarily on the west side of the city, and the people are working on the east side of the city. And there is no, if you're living in Knocknacarra and you want to go to Parkmore, there is no public transport. There is absolutely not one bus going across the Prince Centennial Bridge. There's absolutely no reason tomorrow morning
Is that going to change?
It's got to change.
I know, but I mean,
change.
how are you going to make it change?
We've got to make a change in City Hall, and we have to sort of provide the facility. A bus operator cannot operate from Knocknacarra across the city, across the Prince Centennial Bridge, as we now stand, because he's sitting in traffic the same as a private car. So basically what we really need to do is and we come up against this all the time, the bus lane on Seamus Quirk Road for public transport. People keep wanting it to be opened up for traffic.
Yeah.
We've got to insist.
We've been hearing this for 10, 20 years. Do you know, I mean, some people
you remember the City Council yourself.
I was a member of the City Council, and I shouted and roared about it when I was on the City Council. That's what I wanted to see. Reports came back, and there were studies done, and they basically found against it. So, please.
Could I get out? Just, I know I'm conscious that I'm feeling. I'm so sick listening to this now. Since 1999, it's 21 years. It's time we grew up. I'm 21 years in politics. There is a mindset that is not for a sustainable city, and that's what you're up against. Frank is absolutely right with his suggestion. I have no problem supporting it. Park and Ride was put in the City Development Plan in 2005. It was never rolled out. I know it was Alan, I think, was on. Was it yourself? Yeah. So it's in the city development since 2005. We fought management at that point. We fought them to put it in. It was never rolled out. We do not have a junior minister for sustainable transport. We have a junior minister for international transport and logistics. So I object to you saying that's what opposition do. Opposition don't do that. I have gone in the door with my colleagues every single week since I was elected this year and stood up and put forward sustainable solutions. Absolutely, repeatedly. So when we go back to transport in Galway, they have utterly failed to roll out park and ride. They have allowed traffic congestion to build up. The schools are allowing parents to bring huge cars to schools. It should have been stopped years ago. The Park More was created by bad planning, not on councillors' part. Councillors were left with egg on their faces because the IDA encouraged all the businesses to go into one site with one entrance and one exit and never balanced the development. And no government ever called halt and said, let's balance this out. It's still not too late. We can roll out a sustainable transport system. We have no master plan for Galway. We have no city architect. And the developer-led development is continuing. So if we could get onto the issues, the suggestions are excellent, but they'll never be rolled out unless we have a mindset that makes it a reality.
Okay, I want to ask Pauline specifically, because she was involved in the whole programme for government, and you're in the same party as the Minister for Transport. Within the programme for government, are you aware that either of those specific issues can be addressed? One of them obviously is the issue in relation to whether buses can go over the bridge, and the second one is in relation to schools transport.
Look, firstly, let's just say not everything can be in a programme for government, but it is about the mindset, and that's what Catherine has said there. And what we have in the programme for government is that we are prioritising infrastructure, not in Dublin, but public transport infrastructure in the regional cities. That's what we've said in there. When it comes time for a budget, and you look at your programme for government and you see what are our priorities, what can we get, what can we tick off that list. That's what you do. You look and see what have we said as a collective that are our priorities. Now, nobody can say, you form a government last week, now this week, let's have a bus going over the Quincentennial Bridge. I mean, it's not practical. And in the end of the day, people are saying here, I've been involved in politics for 20 odd years or so on and so forth, and this hasn't happened. Well, we've been in government for 1 week, so let's be realistic as well. Let's say we have down there what our priorities are. I can tell you this, the Green Party have zero interest in being in government and not delivering on sustainable transport. It's one of the sole reasons we're in there, because not only does it deliver for the climate, it also delivers for well-being. And some may say that being in government is a cynical position, but also likewise being outside of government and questioning people's motives for being inside government is also quite cynical. I'm there to do the best that I can. We have put specific things in there around cycling infrastructure, for instance, 1 million a day in there. We've also said we're trebling Local Link, which is the transport across rural Ireland. That got a lot of pushback, and we did it because we had to start showing that actually public transport can work everywhere. Not for everybody, but it can work everywhere. And that's what's been done in other countries across Europe, and we need to now start showing people, because look at out here on Salthill, where the cars are no longer parked along by the prom, and okay, it doesn't look the prettiest with those railings up there at the moment, which are an abomination, quite frankly. But at least you can look across the road and you can see the sea, not just cars facing you. But who would have thought that that's possible? Who would have thought that when you close down the access down to Silver Strand, that then you have a much more enjoyable space? People actually need to see the proof. The proof is of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. People need to see some of these things, and then they can get on board. But even now, and I know on the council, it's still a challenge with the city mobility plan, because you have conflicting interests.
Okay, Pauline. Within you're only in government for a week, and it is absolutely unreasonable to expect you to solve all the problems of the world within a week. But if you're there for 5 years, what would be your hopes and dreams for Galway, as to what would, in particularly in relation to transport, what would you hope to see in practice actually being implemented?
Well, look, what I was quite firm on was Park and Ride, for instance. I think Park and Ride could transform Galway because we have a very small centre and we need, not everybody can use public transport. So if we have Park and Ride in Moycullen, in Furbo, Barna, increase the capacity out in Oranmore, Cllr Galway, if we have that Park and Ride, and I know that Catherine has been a great proponent of Park and Ride and it's been very successful at Christmas, but it hasn't rolled
But like
out.
turkeys, it's only brought out at Christmas.
Absolutely, but we know it's successful. So that's in there, that's in the programme for government.
What
Also
about T3 Pauline?
in,
Surely that would be a good one to bring in as well.
Well, look, you know, I suppose I'm not going to be specific, but I am going to say that we are looking at you know, increasing the rail capacity, for instance. We have said that we are going to prioritise looking at fast rail for the west of Ireland, which I think could transform not just people's lives, but also business in the west of Ireland. And I think, you know, when we look at 30% people, Frank is quite right there about school transport, 30% of the traffic is people bringing children to school. And we do need to, if we addressed that, we could transform the city and see that we actually, people can see that the answer is not in a road.
Yeah.
You know, the answer to all of their problems is not in a road if they can actually have that. But we need to progress with those things. And I know in 5 years' time we want to see some of those things. But if we don't see some progress within the next couple, I think I'd be asking serious questions as to what we're doing
That's
there.
good. We might bring in Cheevers now.
Well, Frank, I think, has been looking for...
I want to make a point there actually.
We'll come to Alan in a second.
In the programme for budget, there's 360 million on a yearly basis for sustainable transport on the basis of 2 to 1 that is public transport vis-a-vis motorways or roads that would be used for say cycle lanes, bus lanes and ways like that. Now another issue that we need to deal with in relation to traffic congestion. I during my term as mayor, I visited a city centre school that didn't have one child from the parish that the school was in. They were all coming out into the city from different areas. Why can't we have a situation where, like they have in the UK, where children go to their nearest school? This is generating traffic and causing traffic and gridlock on the roads in the morning and in the afternoon. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. There's multi ways of actually dealing with traffic. And that would be one of them. The school transport system would be one. Another one would be sort of where people could go from Parkmore to the west side of the city. The Gloose is another option. I'd have concerns, while I think it's something that should be looked at with our city landscape inside the city. You know, the narrow streets. I remember a couple of years ago there, a politician running a local election with a similar name to myself rolled out the possibility of Bindi buses. They showed up for a couple of weeks and then they disappeared. They've never been seen.
I think it was your namesake, wasn't it?
They were, you know, they were rolled out for a couple of weeks. We were never seen there. Public transport is the way to go, but we have to provide the facilities. And people won't sit. And I know a number of years ago I did a survey with a member of the Green Party from Parkmore to B&Q. And we timed it by car across the Quincentennial Bridge, and we timed it by bus, where the bus had to go into Eyre Square and continue, and the car was there 10 minutes ahead of the bus. So why would people go on the bus when they can get there faster in the privacy of their own car and they're door to door? If you're living in Clybourne Road or if you're living in Ballymonian Road and you're getting off a bus that terminates at B&Q, well, what's the logic if you have to walk on a winter's evening all the way to Ballymonian Road in the rain? It doesn't make sense to go on the bus.
Yeah,
that's true. That's good points, Frank. And we might bring in Alan Cheevers, who's been taking copious notes there.
No, I suppose I want to agree with Catherine on a couple of points that she made. Firstly, I think it's something that I find that the Galway transport strategy was introduced in January of 2017, and it's seriously worrying that we haven't seen much of progression on that. And that's seriously worrying to me. In relation to the Park and Ride, I put a motion before Galway City Council, which is actually on last October, that we look at a pilot scheme from Galway Airport into the city. The infrastructure is there. There's over 350 car parking spaces, and I believe that it was definitely worth merit of have given it a pilot scheme, but I was told it was tried before, but because it was tried before it didn't work, we won't be trying it again. But the reality was, they did try it before, but they weren't thinking outside the box. They didn't put a bus lane from Carnmore into Parkmore into the city, so therefore buses were getting caught in behind cars, and so therefore, it wasn't possible that it was going to work. So what I believe what they need to do is we need to look at a collective transport strategy, and that is we look at rail, walking, cycling, as well as the bypass, and I would support the bypass. One thing in the programme of government that I've been very much vocal about myself since 2014 when I first went for election was the designated commuter train from Athenry into the city, and that is in the programme for government, and I believe that this will in some way stop cars coming in to Parkmore from, say, employees living in the county. We see there's a huge uptake in the rail service from Athenry to the city at the moment, and it's increased immensely over the last 5 years. If you look at the car park in Ormore at the Ormore train station, 5 years ago it was empty. Now they're parking on the road, it's full, and that's good to see. But we need to see the designated commuter rail, and that would be frequency of trains, and giving the opportunity to people to leave the car at home. And I think that's the fundamental thing. But there's another thing that I would bring into this conversation as well, is that I think for our economic development and multinational investment, that what we need to see is good public transport investment and the Galway transport strategy rolled out, because at the end of the day, I think that multinational companies always look at the willingness of their employees, and having somebody stuck in a car for an hour and a half going to work is certainly not something that they support. And I would say that many multinational companies at the moment would be looking at Galway and going, right, if we're going to set up in Limerick, Cork, or any other part of the country, is Galway a city that we want to invest in? When we look at a situation where, okay, talent is one thing, and we have the talent, but the willingness of their actual employees, somebody getting caught in traffic, and we see it in Parkmore. Parkmore is absolute disaster over the last number of years. And the NTA had a meeting last November trying to come up with solutions on how they're going to alleviate the traffic situation there. My colleague, Councillor Peter Kane, came up with an idea last year of maybe we look at getting Gael in there.
Alan, I have a question from the audience here, and it's do you use public transport yourself?
Do I use public transport myself?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about in the lockdown situation. Do you generally use it yourself?
Well, I would use the bus. I've used the bus a couple of times, and I've used the train if I'm going to Dublin a lot.
Is it probably an unfair question?
No, that's fine. And by the way, I drive. Regarding myself, I drive a hybrid car as well. So basically, I probably drive more, but I walk a lot. I use as in public transport if I'm going to Dublin or whatever.
But would you use it on a commuting basis yourself? Like, would you use it? Because one thing that I hear a lot from people is that people often propose transport solutions that they themselves wouldn't use. And this is the thing. A lot of people say park and ride is great, but their intention in saying that is that they want to get the cars in front of them out of the way so they can use the road more quickly. Rather than that they actually want to use the park and ride. People in the city, for example, might say they want to use the park and ride, but surely park and ride really is more benefit to people who are working in the city and are commuting in from the county. Those people aren't necessarily shouting for it though.
But I have to say myself personally, if the park and ride, once it's established on the east side of the city, for me going into town, I would certainly use it 100%. When the commuter rail service that is proposed comes in to Ormore station, I certainly would use that as well. That's 100%. I think we all have a responsibility to use commuter.
I'd like to move on if possible. If we could just, there's some of the audience are saying there's a bit of a problem with the sound, and we apologise for that because of social distancing. Obviously, we can't be all near the microphone, and we don't have sound facilities. But if I could just go to Catherine here for a minute, because two of the big issues that I want to put before we finish today. Obviously, housing is something that Catherine has a very, very long traditional involvement in. She's been talking about housing in Galway City for a long time, and it probably was the biggest issue in the election. If we could just move this microphone slightly closer to her, I think. Catherine, what are your views on housing? Do you think that we can in the government?
It's an obscenity to have 10,500 people homeless. I mentioned that already. I'm not just associated with housing, I'm associated with putting forward a sustainable way of living in a city that should be thriving in a green, vibrant way. Go back when I deal with housing. We're talking about an outer bypass constantly, and the problem with that is all of the other solutions were neglected. They were put in the halfpenny place. That's what happened. So, Pauline, when I referred to 21 years in politics, it wasn't to get at a Green Party. It was to say we put all of these proposals forward repeatedly, but the mindset was an outer bypass, so no other solution was looked at. And we're still within that mindset today. We have to show people, of course, there are lots of areas that public transport won't suit, but we have no choice. But it has taken a climate emergency, a biodiversity emergency, and a housing crisis, plus COVID, to get us even to begin to look at changes. The Salthill proposal was done way back in 15 and 16, but management wouldn't take the extra leap to take the cars. It took COVID to do that. To come back to the housing crisis. It's unacceptable that we have a crisis. We have lots of public land, we have lots of institutional land, and we should have a massive public housing building programme. Not social housing, not a division anymore, public housing. And if necessary, change the legislation so that lots of people have access to rented houses for their lifetime, if that's what they want. And I'm disappointed. I thought the Greens were very good when they wrote back to the government and they said public housing and public land. I gave them the thumbs up for that. But the final document that came out was watered down. And we have now a proposal on public land to put a mixture of houses private. I think that's totally unacceptable. We should have public housing and public land. HAP needs to stop. HAP was brought in by Labour and Fine Gael back in 15, and it was an absolute disaster. And Frank will remember, I was called a liar on the council, at the council meeting, when I said you were taken off the waiting list once you got a HAP. We're going to approach $1 billion. We are going to approach $1 billion in payments out to landlords to house our people in private houses that's now called social housing with absolutely no security of tenure. The policy of the government is actively putting the prices of houses up beyond the ability of anyone to buy, matched by building a mixture of housing on public land that should be all public housing, indistinguishable from other houses, all tied in with sustainable transport, sustainable jobs on both sides of the city. And we have to stop the developer-led development. We have no master plan. Our city development plan says the council will facilitate a master plan because they said they couldn't afford to produce one. So we're letting the developers produce the plan and we're having little input into that.
Before we move on to Pauline, can bring in one name?
Well, you need to get the microphone closer to your mic, I think. So
maybe I can the microphone.
Sorry.
So
if you can't bring the mic to mic, bring mic to mic.
The live mic. Okay, so Catherine, I'd just like to ask you, what do you think of T3? And do you think would it work in Galway?
Transport. TT, I just forgot the story.
Okay, so basically T3 is that a car with 3 or more people on it.
Yeah.
Can use the bus lanes.
That has come up
That's
repeatedly.
been on City Council meetings.
I have an open view on that.
Good.
I have an open view on it. But we need more buses on the road and we need less cars on the road. Now, taking one little solution without looking at the overall thing where we're heading to. And so I heard there that Gael said he supports the outer bypass, and I don't want to get into it. It's gone through a process now, and that's it. Let it go through the process. But when we had management up in Dublin, and you asked about national government, and the former Senator O'Reilly brought up everybody from Galway because traffic is so bad in Galway, which it is. Both managers, the county and the city, said we can't do this without an outer bypass. They said we can't roll out the public transport initiatives without the outer bypass. Therein is the crux of the matter.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. We might bring.
Can I respond to?
Well, sorry, we said we'd come to Pauline first, if that's okay, and then sorry, Pauline.
As far as it goes,
yeah, sorry, just because there were a few points there made about the Green Party and I suppose in relation to housing, I just wanted to come back in there because I think housing is hugely important. And yes, on the doors, it was the biggest issue. and last year the biggest issue was climate, probably. And bringing those two things together, climate still exists as a problem and has to be dealt with. And in a way, that's what politicians are here for. It's not just to respond to what's coming up, but it's actually to do our duty, and that is to respond in a long-term way and have a long-term vision, so that we are securing the future, not just for this generation, but for generations in the future. And there has been too much short-termism. There's been too much what's going to get me elected this time and what's going to get me elected next time. But housing is still critical, and the two wrap together, because yes, the policy of the Green Party is public housing and public land, but it is also mixed tenure. And look, despite the fact that public housing has been our policy for a really long time, and some others are now on board with this as being critical, very little has happened on it, you know. But now we do have in a programme for government movement on it, and yes, it's not 100% public housing, but look, we needed to get something done, and we need to show proof of concept. So we now have cost rental mentioned for the first time ever in a programme for government. Last year, 5,500 social houses were put onto the market. This, what we are saying, is 10,000 per year for the term of the government. It's not perfect, but it is significantly better. We're also saying a referendum on the right to housing. And some people may say, well, it doesn't exactly, that's exactly what it is. We know, because we've spoken to all of the parties in government, and in the end of the day, I've said it before and I'll say it again, no party wants to be in government if it feels that it's not achieving its aims and it's not getting what the people of Ireland need. And the Green Party, once bitten, twice shy, we put in place in the programme for government enough to assure the vast majority of our members that we are getting what is needed for the long-term security and sustainability for the country. And if we don't, we will simply not stay. And included in that is housing, because yes, sustainability in terms of the environment is critically important to us, but it must be matched with social justice. It must be, and that's what's in there. That's what I'm determined to achieve as part of this government, and I believe that that's what we're all determined to achieve.
Very good. So maybe
Yeah,
to
I
move
want
on
in relation to the housing.
Yeah.
And the
Move
point
the
you
mic up
Okay.
between you.
Okay.
Maybe you can put that.
Okay, I
I'm saying it.
Juliet.
Yeah, you know, I suppose that I have to agree with, you know, Pauline, but Pauline's in there. I think there's, you know, we have 50,000 social houses in the programme government over the next 5 years. If I look at Galway as well, and especially my own constituents, that young couples trying to buy a house, affordable housing, I think is just as important as well. We need to see young couples being in a position to buy an affordable house and have a home, and that has been something that's been a challenge over the last few years. I also welcome the discretionary funding for local authorities going from 2 million up to 6 million. But I think regarding our developments in the city, and I've said this when I got elected last year, for social inclusion, I thought it was really important that we looked at affordable and a social mix opposed to all social, and I think that's important as well. Also, I believe in the Part 5 that they're looking at in this form of government of doing Part 5 would be affordable and also rent affordable housing as well. But I think that there is an ambitious plan here in the programme of government, and I think that we need to really, at a local level, I mean, even if you look at my own area, the Galway City East, which I represent, I think if you look at some of the projects, housing projects, over the next 2 or 3 years, I think we'll see delivery of about 200, in the next 2 years, probably about 276 new homes. And well, there's, out of that's 95 socially affordable, and the rest is social. But I think we need to be progressive. I think we need to really take this on, and I believe this government will would work hard to do for that.
Okay, could we go to Frank on this as well?
In relation to the housing situation, Catherine refers to the fact that there's 2,500 people on the housing, homeless on the housing.
Well, they're homeless.
Nationwide. At a local level, we have roughly 4,000 people on the housing list. 4,000 applicants. If you multiply it, where there's families of 2 and 4 and 6, and that, then you get a much bigger figure. But at the moment, between under construction and in the pipeline, in the planning process, and there's somewhere in the region of 1,100 houses coming on stream in Galway at the moment. And that's thanks to the work of the previous government. And, you know, it costs money. We were in a situation where as a nation we were bankrupt. And I sort of say, while I agree with Catherine on a lot of things, a lot of times, you know, people sort of jump up and down and shout about the issues that are there, but then sit back and sort of demand that other people find solutions and you know, talk about, you know, what can be done. There's a lot of issues around homelessness, like we have bank repossessions, and you know, I won't go into that, but Catherine knows issues there in relation to bank repossessions and where banks were putting people out on the street, and where, you know, that was unacceptable. And yet people sort of worked for them and sort of, you know, jumping up and down and sort of creating, you know.
That's a personal attack, which is really
So if we could move the microphone, please.
That is a cowardly personal attack.
It's not a cowardly person. In fact, I asked you in the council chamber.
Do you know
I asked you in the council
that
chamber
is
if
a
you actually
cowardly.
worked at the Bank of Scotland and Ireland. And you said you did.
When you're finished harassing now, that is a cowardly personal
No, it's
attack.
fact.
Without even the courage to mention
Fact.
something. So let's look at housing.
Fact.
Let's look at housing. Since 2009, suspended was on the quarterly report. No further houses were built until last year. The reason that we have 10,500 people homeless and people on a waiting list in Galway back to 2003, at least 2003, which is 17 years, is a direct result of the policies of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael.
And Labour. Labour were in government as well.
Labour,
And you're a former member of the Labour Party.
Labour absolutely brought in HAP with Fine Gael, which was a disaster. And I've already just mentioned the price that it's going to reach. So when we talk about social housing, that's HAP. I wish politicians would stop putting in HAP into social housing. HAP is a private landlord, a private house. You get a certain amount under the HAP and you top it up. It is the most unacceptable and unfair system. If we look at housing in Galway, we have public land that we're not building on. I'm not talking about social housing. I'm using the word public housing that's open to everyone at a controlled rent. I believe that the government should be central to the market. We need absolutely need private landlords. We need them. But we also need a state with a very, very central role in the provision of homes. Houses are not an asset. They are a home. They're the most essential step to allow you to participate in all the other aspects of society. Without that security of tenure, you can't do it.
Yeah, can I
this
just
infighting, you can't deal with the issue. It is wrong to have people waiting on the list since 2003. Do I think the government can solve it overnight? Absolutely not. But they're not going to sort it because they're still reliant on the market and they haven't put themselves Cllr and Amy in the middle of the
just
road.
address Catherine's point to the three representatives of the government parties, because I think it's a very important one, because it's not just about building houses, it's also about the affordability, and it's about the philosophy of whether correct me if I'm misquoting you now, but I mean, the affordability is a key thing, and security of tenure is a key thing to people. Homes are very important, whereas we can build any number of houses, but if they're empty, or if they're owned by landlords, or if they're owned by banks, that's not really much good to anybody. Do you know, there's a lot of houses in Galway City, according to the census in 2016, about 10% are actually without anybody in them at all. Do you know, so building houses isn't necessarily the solution to the housing problem.
Yeah, just one aspect that Frank referred. My experience going way back in a different life was the county register on instructions from the government, which was Fine Gael and Labour, I think, if I've lost, but certainly Fine Gael. The instructions to the county registers throughout the country was, if it's a family home, please do not evict them. I'm paraphrasing, but they set in motion not to. So the county register all over the countries did their best in relation to residential homes, just on facts.
Yeah, because
I leave the rest.
we'll just get a quick thing from the three, just very quickly from the three. I know it's difficult to address this in just a few minutes, but
Along the homes that we have,
affordability. If you could just focus on affordability.
Affordability. There's a cost involved in building houses. There's a cost in land. In order to make them affordable, the state have to intervene by virtue of that'll be state land, which we have quite a substantial amount of it in the city. In the 50s and 60s, we had developments like Glenina Heights, Monavay Road, and there was one on College Road as well. Ardalong, yeah. They were all done, to help people for affordability. We have a crazy situation where certain...
Will there be more of that, Frank?
There needs to be. There needs to be. Everybody, in my opinion, has the right to own their own home.
Okay.
And it should be
if we could
a situation where people who...
I apologise for the brief brevity, but if we could just...
Yes,
if we could just move on to Alan, if that's okay.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. That we need to make it more affordable, and we need to go back to what we saw many years ago in Galway City. I mean, listen, I'm not a big fan of Galway City Council ticking a box by going in buying ready-made developments. For example, in Geraghty on the Monavay Road, they paid 18 million for 52 A1 rated houses. I mean, I think people need to be housed and accept that. But what I'm saying is that we need to use the public lands to build the houses, to make it affordable, go back to the days that we had back when people were able to get a home at an affordable price and the opportunity to live in an affordable.
Yeah, and rentals currently at the moment, €2,000 is not uncommon in the various websites for a family to rent a house.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable?
No, not at all. I mean, listen, I'm just, let's be, just for clarity, I don't own a home myself, I'm renting at the moment. So I'm right in the middle of that, as in paying high rent, so I know what it's all about.
Could you pass?
Yeah, look, I think there are a number of factors in relation to affordability. Like, I would go back to so that there's the legal point of view that people don't have security of tenure, and that's where public housing comes in, and also a reform of the law. And I think that needs to happen to ensure that people can stay in their home for a really long time. I meet an awful lot of families, and they're fearful of even broaching a landlord to say that there's a problem with the house, in case that they're found out in the rear and then have to move far away from their children's schools. So look, it's at a critical point right now, and we do need to make some actually implement some of the things that we have all been calling for a really, really long time. And I think that that's what the government has an opportunity to do. But I would also say, and I'm not long off the city council, in relation to Airbnb was one of the big things that I spoke about. And when we saw what happened with COVID, when we saw that people weren't coming to stay in Airbnb, all of those properties were coming on the market, and they were all looking to do social housing. And what we need to be doing there is saying, give us a good rate and give it to us for 20 years, if that's what you really want to do. Because this idea of month to month, whatever is going to bring me in the profit, has to stop. And we need more controls, but we also need to be able to actually implement the law, and that hasn't been happening. It simply hasn't been happening in relation to Airbnb. Public housing on public land, it's not just about building the houses, it's also about building sustainable communities. And we have places right in the city centre where they're talking about building car parks, hotels, and we need to actually think about, it's not about housing, it's not about a roof over your head, it's about the home, it's about the place that you live in, it's about the trees outside, and it's about how easy it is to get to your school. And all of those things, I believe that this government needs to take into account, but I also think the local authority and the executive have a critical role to play, and they've not been stepping up to the mark, in my view.
Okay, so back to the local authority. As we're in the last few minutes of the programme, I'd like to raise one or two issues. Alan, you've been very vocal on antisocial behaviour, so would you like to speak about that for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, listen, antisocial behaviour, especially in my own area, has been a serious issue over the last few months. Last Monday, with the mayor, I arranged a meeting with the local area councillors with the superintendent and with the head of the housing departments in Galway City Council. I think that it's a combination of things. I think first of all, I think we have to, people are indoors more often during the COVID, but the other thing is that it's social issues that we're discussing here today. They're not being addressed. Number two, policing in the areas hasn't been up to standard.
I heard you say I see Geraghty on the beat.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think we should go back to the old traditional way of policing. If we look at, let's say, guard at the moment, they come into a station, patrol cars, and then they drive out again. What we need to see is guard on the beat within the communities, walking around with a presence.
So more community
guard based, and I believe that's going to happen. But from the meeting last Monday, we believe that's going to happen. But the other thing as well, as I mentioned earlier on, is that when you, to deter that, one of the other aspects is that social housing. When you've put 52 social housing, for example, on the Monday Road, right? Already, what we're finding is this antisocial behaviour has been an issue there over the last few months. And what I would like to see is that it be a social and affordable mix. That I believe that's the way forward regarding for further developments in the city. And I've said that all along.
Okay.
But I just believe that we have to work as communities within our communities. I think the onus is on local representatives for whatever to do that, and I think that's really, really important as well.
Excellent. Frank, I'd like to bring you in on canals.
Canals, I thought the original subject was what the government can do for the Galway, and I'd like to make the point that there's a shortfall in the City Council's budget of 25 million, and Councillor Cheevers made reference there to the Council paying 18 million for 58 houses. 25 million would buy a lot of houses, so that's something that we need, and we need a stimulus package to actually get this city up and going again, and get to make up for the loss of tourists and that. The canals, they're a central part of our infrastructure. I'm the chair of the Cllr Navigation Trustees, and I'm working on trying to get the canals, rehabilitate them. Nothing has been done with the canals. Nobody's taken responsibility for them. Let it be the City Council.
What would you do with them, Frank?
Well, they need to be dredged. They need to be cleaned. We have a situation where you have trees growing in them for the last 30 years. I endeavoured a couple of years ago to have some of the trees removed. I've got a lot of abuse for it. Trees shouldn't be grown in a canal. There's a place, time, and I'm as good a tree hugger as anybody. The trees should be grown in a forest or in a park, but not in the middle of a canal. Not in the middle of a canal. And the stonework on the canal needs to be repointed. A few of the things we have working at the moment is through the Cllr Navigation Trustees is the railings along the canal on Eglinton Canal between Ward's Shop and say the back of Monroe's all the way down to the Clada Basin. We're repainting them and replacing the bits that are sort of gone beyond repair. We're also putting funding aside to actually put a second gate into the Clada Basin to facilitate where boats would be able to go in and out at all times. Currently there's only one gate. Every lock gate should have two gates. We've also put up life buoys, in the process of putting up life buoys, and we're looking for contractors to come on board to actually clean out the Clada Basin, desilt it, and to do some work on cleaning the canals. They're an essential part of our city that tourists rarely get to see. They've been neglected for years, and it's about time we actually did something with them.
Okay, just as we're coming to the end of our programme here, I'd just like to give everybody a chance for the last word. If we could go back to the sort of original question, which is basically, what would you hope to see for Galway? So perhaps if you could be offered one thing, the new government to deliver one big thing, what would it be that you would like to see? And please, if you could keep it to about 1 minute or 30 seconds or 1 minute.
30 seconds would be good.
Yeah.
Starting with me?
Yeah, please.
I'd like to see a commitment to a thriving, vibrant, green city with sustainable transport, with the recognition that we need homes for our people. And we need also that Galway is one of the 5 cities destined to grow. It must grow in a sustainable way and not at the expense of rural areas. And within that, we need proper sustainable solutions immediately, some short term, some medium term, some long term. And I would also see, like the city, to roll out its it's got a status as a bilingual city, and we're paying absolute lip service to that status.
Thanks, Catherine.
Sorry.
You sprayed me, Neil. God almighty. Now, Frank, you might want to speak there.
What I would like to
30
see is Galway Harbour. It's an integral part of our city. It's right in the heart of the city, and it is proposed that Galway City Council will take over the harbour. I would like to see the government to actually move it from being a tier 3 up to a tier 2, and that will be taken over by Galway City Council. They sit on a massive land bank, I think it's 40 acres, that could be used in the heart of the city for development, for housing inside in the city, that would be linked to Eyre Square. I would also propose, and it's something I would like to see done, that when the harbour hopefully will be developed into a harbour that will be able to accommodate, when the new harbour is built, and that it will be able to accommodate cruise ships, that we would actually move our public transport completely out of Eyre Square down into the harbour, and that we would put in a tram that would service Eyre Square and the docks. It could go out between the Merrick Hotel and the AIB Bank, and that everybody in Eyre Square would go from Eyre Square in the city centre down to the harbour on this tram, which would also be used by the ferry companies. It would mean then that the city centre could be completely pedestrianised and cycle friendly, and the park in Eyre Square, there would be no noise of diesel. I know diesel has been, in the next 10-15 years will be eliminated.
Thanks.
But you would have complete silence
Right, yeah.
in the city, and you know.
I think many of us here would love to see trams in Galway. Alan?
For me, I would like to see a faster movement of the Galway transport strategy. I believe that this city needs a good functioning public transport system, and I want to see that, and I believe it's very, very important for our economic development and our multinational investment. I also want to see the opportunity of young couples that I meet every day get the opportunity to be able to afford their own home and buy their own home, and people on our waiting list, the 4,500 Galway City Council waiting list, getting a social house or waiting for a social house, get the delivery of their house. Also, I would like to see that the SME businesses in this city, which are an integral part of our development, to get the support after this COVID crisis, and also that we develop our tech industry as well, because that is becoming a very, very much important part of our city as a relation to business. So I think that it's really, really important that we see delivery of proper funding for SME businesses in this city to develop it, because at the end of the day, the SME businesses in this country employ 65% of the workforce, and I think we have to be very cognizant of that.
Thanks, Alan. That's good. That's good. Okay, and Pauline?
I'd like to see us retain the vibrancy of our community, and that includes the arts, and it also includes children and those that are the most vulnerable. And actually they are the ones that have been hit most during COVID. And we really, if we're to see a recovered Galway, we need to have those at the heart of it, and also to build up on that vision of a city that is comfortable to live in, that is a joyous place to be, where you can cycle and you can walk comfortably, where you can have a home that isn't, I suppose, far away from where you live and work, or where you go to school and you work. And if it is that you have the transport solutions to get you to where you need to be. And with all of this, I think that we can address the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, but do it in a way that brings people with you. And I think that that's what's so good about having several parties in a coalition, that you bring everybody with you. It's not coming in and telling people what to do. It's actually doing it in a way where everybody can feel part of the solutions.
Okay, that's great, Pauline. Thanks very much. So, just to let you know, we're going to be doing the show every 3 weeks. So we're back here in. First of all, I'd like to thank Anthony O'Reilly and family for hosting us today, and this will be a regular venue from now on. So, big shout out to O'Reilly's Bar and Kitchen, and I'd like to thank the 4 panelists for coming. It was a very fast hour. Thanks for your time, and final word with Neil.
Okay, I think I probably need to go to the mic or to shout or something like that.
I'll bring it to you.
Just, I think new beginnings in new government. There's always an opportunity, for change and for improvement, and we've got a very radical situation for change at the moment. So I'm delighted that Galway Politics Live is back. I hope that you're all very welcome onto it, and thank you very much. And I mean, really, honestly, I think working together is the way forward in my view. But thank you to everybody for listening. There's been a consistent number of people, and apologies at the start we had a little issue, a technical issue, but I mean, as of now, we're back, Mike, and it's great.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, you know, I hope that all the hopes and the dreams of the politicians here today, or at least some of them, can be fulfilled over the next 5 years.
Excellent.
So anyway, thank you to everybody, and I think that's the end of the show, and thank you very much to O'Reilly's Bar for hosting us here in Salthill.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.